Good day, everybody, and I'm gonna tell you what I did in 5 seconds. I made a timer. Well, obviously. You can set for seconds or minutes. Right now I'm gonna set a timer for 1 minute, and we'll remember it when we will. So, first thing that I have to mention, clean input box, right? You watched that video before, and it has, well, clean input box provides you a method to wait for input. And this is what I usually use to give input into my classes and functions. An example. Let's remember file search, and here it is. So, file system search rather, you can either provide the input to it directly if you already have the input from some other place, or you can use get input to use clean input box and get this box to type in what you need to type in. However, I didn't set up timer that way. The syntax is very simple. Timer, we create an instance, and immediately we can set, let's say, 5 minutes. Boom. That's it. If we run this, we set a timer for 5 minutes. So we can use this class as if it's a function. I do realize that it's not the best practice to do that, and it should have been, so the time should not have been here, and instead there should be a start method where you specify your time. That's technically the better way to do it, but I simply felt like timer that feels like a function feels really nice, and already have a way to give it input using my runner. So TS, that's my personal flag for timer in seconds, and then I specify the time, or just T space for minutes. I set that up, and you can watch my runner video to figure out how that works. Basically, my point is there's no input box in the class itself. Cry about it. That's a bit aggressive, but yeah. So the first parameter, well, first of all, I will reiterate that the new method is these brackets when you create an instance of a class. So the first parameter is time. By default, it's in minutes. However, if you set the second parameter to false, now these are 5 seconds. And should exit app is false by default, but if you set it to true, once the timer is up, or rather, I wonder actually what that does. Probably nothing. Okay, so 2 seconds. Once you close this window, the script will exit app. Once again, by default, it isn't, so my script is still running, but you can make it exit the script in this many minutes or seconds. Why do I do that? Let me explain. So, say I have my script. I'm working on it, and at the same time, I don't know, I set my clothes to wash, and it's gonna go off in an hour. Okay, so let's set a timer for 60 minutes. Cool, so I'm working on my script, maybe in some library that I made. Oh, like margin X should be like margin 1 for that reason. Let's reload. Oh, fuck. Well, now that timer is gone. Well, it's not for me, because I did it in a bit of a different way. By default, if you reload your script, everything in it will, well, reload, including the timer. However, let's go to my implementation of T, meaning for minutes. First, I write to a file, so I'll provide input. That input being the time, so T say 60. I write 60 into some file. Doesn't matter which, just it should be consistent. And then I run my timer script. Let's go to it. So single instance off. Well, we'll cover this after. So we call the timer with the time we got by reading the file that we just wrote to. Now, there is a way to communicate between scripts using messages. So that's probably better. However, to be honest, I've seen some issues with messages and them being not particularly consistent. But write file and read file is really good in terms of consistency. And true. So after the timer is up, this script will exit app, which is what I want. Now, why single instance? Because of my ability to set as many timers as I want. See? It's kind of annoying that they jump to different places. But yeah, that's the idea. Hold on. Which one is beta 15? That's the 13. Okay. What I hate about updating the V2 version is it continues to jump here, and I have to drag it back into here. There's probably an easy solution to this, to do that automatically. And if you know it, please leave a comment. I'm sure I'm not the only one who is annoyed with this. And the reason for true is because the timer, for most of its life, doesn't actually occupy the thread. It uses a set timer. So after we call this, even though there is a set timer, the script will just exit because there's nothing after or no hotkeys. So it needs to be persistent. I include the timer, text, so we can use read file, and paths to get a path to timer.txt. When you use this, you won't need paths. You'll just provide the path. However, I do recommend my paths idea. I think it's brilliant and makes maintaining your project much easier. I'm starting to do the same thing for win titles by having a class for every window that I need and using classes. Let me give you an example. So Spotify, it has a property win title for its, you will never guess, win title, and then all the functions that I created for Spotify are also here. So yeah, I really recommend that. Now onto the implementation. So we provide these three things. Time word. This is semantics. You might have noticed that it says for 5 seconds. But if we specify a minute, timer set for 1 minute. So depending on this parameter, it's either minutes or seconds, depending on what you actually do. So it takes the time parameter, say 60 if it's an hour, 60 if in minutes, then minutes, so 60 minutes. If it's not in minutes, it's seconds, and here you go. Time word is being used in this place. We'll get to it. So, and we get the end time. This is the time in milliseconds, which is the end. I mean, yeah. So we use it. We use tick count for this. So we grab tick count, which is right now, and here we go. And we add time to it, multiplied by 60,000 if it's in minutes, so 60 seconds, or 1,000 for a second, because tick count is in milliseconds. We round that up because otherwise it wouldn't work. Thank you. And we get the end time. Cool. This should exit app, should exit app. I do this line for dealing with scope, quote-unquote, issues. Now we start the timer. Cool. So we start a set timer that checks the time every half a second. That's precise enough. However, if you really care about this, to be as specific as possible, you can make this number lower. However, it's really not necessary in my opinion. And we get an info saying timer set for time word. What we actually got here. Amazing. Now, what is faux? And why are there two different things? Usually, when you use function objects, you can just say, so we have a timer function, for example. That's a function object, and here you go. So usually when you work with set timers, by the way, let me link those two videos. So usually in set timers, where were we, by the way? Yeah, here. You would just omit the brackets and that would work. However, if you're using a class, this stops working because every method in your class, no matter if it's static or not static, there is a hidden parameter which you don't even need to create a place for, and that parameter is this, so the context. So if we just remove this and use isItTime, omitting the brackets, we will get an error saying something along the lines of incorrect function object, but in a more professional wording. So to fix this, we have to bind this. And it's kind of annoying that we no longer have the ability to just omit the brackets and have the function object. Kinda annoying, but oh well. So you use bind this, and here you go. That's a function object. Amazing. So that's what we call in the set timer. Now, isItTime? Not yet. isItTime checks the current tick count, so what is the time now, and end time. So what's the tick count that we're waiting for? If now is less than then we don't do anything. However, if tick count is bigger than end time, then that means that our time has passed and the timer should ring. So we do alarm and then stop. Stop meaning stop the set timer that checks whether it's time. Because it is time, we can stop checking. Alarm. So, first of all, we create an info saying your timer for time word. So if you set for 5 seconds, it will say your timer for 5 seconds is up. This is really useful because say you have multiple timers, and if there are no information to tell you which timer just rang, it can be confusing. However, if it displays the time you set the timer for, well, it's much more manageable. So we create an infos and grab its handle. And while that ID, that handle, exists as a window, we make a beeping sound and sleep for 200 seconds. Now you might say, well, hold on, Axelfolder. You're an imposter. A Susibaka, perhaps. Because I don't use sleep and I despise it. But in this situation, it makes a lot of sense, and there's not really a reason to fuck around with another set timer. Not really a reason. However, you could absolutely do that. So, the reason why I'm using a while loop, by the way, is to occupy the thread before this. So, should exit app, which we specified here. If we should, then we exit app. If we shouldn't, then we don't. And that's what we are occupying the thread for with the while loop. Oh, right. By the way, infos. What even is that? Made a video on that as well. I'll link it in the description and in the card that just appeared in your top right corner. So, to show it off, you can either click on the text to remove that info or just press escape. So I just clicked on it. I could have pressed escape to reach the same effect. However, when clicking, well, let me show you an example. I have multiple. If I press escape, the oldest one gets destroyed. However, if I click on what I want to destroy, that one will be destroyed. And then new ones occupy the spaces that are now free. I explained that and many more amazing features of this function that I wrote in that video. Alright, anything else that I need to mention? Alright, stop. That references the function object that we got and sets it to 0, stopping the initial timer that checks whether it's time. Cool. And that's it. Now, implementation. TS, which I showed you off, so I call timer with the input, so 5, which I just did, and false, meaning seconds. That's literally it. And the reason why I don't use the write file method is because, well, these are seconds. I'm probably not going to reload my script in this short of a time period. However, for minutes, I implemented this. However, you don't really have to. Maybe you don't reload your script that often, or you can hold that off. If you were to make the same thing for minutes, the only thing that you would change is this. Boom. Done. So it's really, really easy to use. And it works great. So go ahead, lay your clothes into the washing machine and say T60 or whatever else you choose. I mean, you can easily just use clean input box to get your input and provide it into the timer. Very easy to do. Matter of fact, I'll even show this. So clean input box, create an object, wait for input. So that's input. And now we do timer, input. Yeah, and that's it. So even though it's not a method of the timer class, it's okay. It's not difficult to implement. Or even this. So wait for input. Single line even. So it's not difficult. Okay, If you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment if you have something to say, maybe a nice welcoming message. Maybe you don't understand something and want it explained. I'll try my best to reply to all the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in AutoHotkey or Vim. As you might have noticed, I already made 2 videos on Vim, and I'm not going to stop, at least in the near future. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.